Today's webinar, Building a Culture of Automation. Today's webinar is really about the opportunities that exist in your environment to automate and give your team time back in their day. The more you can automate, the more efficient you can be. If you're one of our MSP partners, the more profitable you can be. If you're on an internal IT team, this is your ability to scale and open up time for your team to focus on those strategic projects that will really create opportunities for your business. And so we want to talk about the non-technical side, right? How to build a culture of automation and really identify those automation opportunities, build maturity in the automation space, and make sure that you're really leaning into the concept of automation to give your team back time. I'm going to start with a few housekeeping items, introduce the team here, and then we'll jump right into the content. So today's webinar is going to be recorded and the recording will be shared. It usually can take 48 to 72 hours to send that out and share with you all. So when we're done, please be patient. We will send it out and you will get the recording. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We do prioritize those Q&A questions over the ones in chat, although we do try to engage in chat as well and answer any questions we see there. But as we wrap up, we will have some time to answer your questions, maybe dive deeper into use cases, answer any questions about the platform, or really, again, how to build that culture of automation. So put those in Q&A. We will answer them as we go, and particularly at the end. And then finally, we do have a giveaway and Q&A at the end. So if you're interested in winning I think it's a GoPro, hang around till the end and we'll announce a winner. And again, you can pick Jeff's brain at the end as well, which is always worth hanging around for. If you're interested in engaging with NinjaOne or our community, you can join us on Discord. We are going to drop that link in chat. We have our own dedicated Discord server that you can talk to our product managers, talk to NinjaOne users, learn more about the product. But it really is a community of NinjaOne users, so you can get best practices and share what you've learned, that sort of thing. In addition, we do have a new webinar. It's kind of last minute, so I do want to announce it here. Master Your Backups, Essential Best Practices for Everyone. This is a great opportunity to learn best practices around backup. And we'll walk through kind of why you would set up backup the way, excuse me, the best ways to set up a backup, why you might make some different choices around your backup strategy, et cetera. It really is a hands-on tactical webinar, so we do invite you to participate in that as well. We'll drop the link in chat there as well. So now that we're done pitching, let's jump into the NinjaOne team. My name is Pete Breton. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Customer Marketing here at NinjaOne, and I'm joined by Jeff Hunter.
Hi, I am Jeff Hunter. I am the Sales Engineer Manager. I mainly assist with MSPs, but I talk to pretty much everybody here at Ninja. And happy to show you some good use cases for automation today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. We do have some slides. We are going to spend about half the time in the platform walking through some real world automation examples. But because we're talking about the non-technical side of building a culture of automation as well, we do have some slides to walk through. Just so you know, these are all kind of sourced from directly from our partners. These are recommendations that we've gotten from our advisory board, from users, power users, partners who are happy to share their experience and best practices with us. So this isn't just us sitting in a room in an ivory tower building these out. We are getting these directly from partners. So we'd also love your feedback as we go through this, what you're automating, what your best practices are as well. And we're actually going to take a moment and pause partway through to actually ask you to jump in and share that. So keep that in mind. So I like to start with this slide here. Automation applied to an efficient process will magnify the efficiency. Automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. This is a warning to start out with, that your organization needs to be operationally mature enough to have efficient processes in place to be able to identify well-run processes versus not before you really jump into automation. If you don't have that operational efficiency, then you may be automating these inefficient processes that may not lead to standardization and better outcomes for everyone. So before you automate anything, look at the process, make sure it is efficient, make sure it is delivering the outcomes that you want, and then automate it. It's really important that you start with a strategy and goals and an efficient process before you begin automating, or else you may end up with a worse scenario than what you started with. But if you have that operational maturity, if you have that efficiency in place, automating it will add more and really benefit your organization. So just a little warning to start out with, but also a pitch for building out that operational maturity and making sure that you have those great processes in place. So let's jump into why automation is important. This is just a really quick overview of what it really costs to solve a problem, right? And what we have here is a chart that from right to left really talks about the resolution of an issue. So obviously you're going to generally start with tier 1 support, then move up to tier 2 and then tier 3. And as you go up, you're adding more time and more cost and more incremental cost each time something moves up that chain, right? So from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3, you're progressively getting not only more expensive overall, but incrementally more expensive to solve an issue. So if you can move things from the right, from tier 3, all the way down to that self-service, and then even potentially to automation and prevention, you're going to realize significant business value. Now, sometimes if you don't have the right tools and processes in place, it may be hard to actually measure this outcome, but at least anecdotally, that, Jeff, I think before this was actually a tier 3 support tech, and, you're paying him more than you're paying a tier 1 support tech. That's pretty understandable, right? But if you could also move it over to self-service and then even automation and prevention, you don't have to pay anyone, right? You pay once for the automation to be built and then a small incremental amount for it to be maintained. But essentially at scale, you're moving everything off Jeff's plate all the way down to your tool to remove that cost. So even if you don't have the tools and measurement in place to measure the clear benefit and the clear outcome, that moving from tier 3 down to automation and prevention, or even tier 1, is going to have significant business benefit and cost reduction. So that's really what we're trying to point out here is there may be opportunities to move things from tier 3 to tier 2, or tier 2 to tier 1, or tier 1 to self-service. That's part of the automation, but also there are opportunities to go to that full closed loop, zero touch automation, and that should be your ultimate goal. So let's jump into the actual recommendations here. And Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong if you were a tier 3 support or not, but I think that's what you were.
Close enough.
He's going to tell me how I'm wrong later. All right, so let's jump into the actual recommendations here. I'm going to blow some minds, right? Automate the easy stuff first. You've never heard that before. This is brand new knowledge. I'm glad you've all come. Hopefully you've learned everything you need to. Automate the easy stuff today. Here are some easy recommendations of things that you can go and identify to automate right now. These, again, are recommendations from our partners and their best practices, looking at what tasks are driving the highest volume of tickets. Are there opportunities for automation there? Let's go and look at all of our tickets, categorize them by type and task and activity, and look at the ones that are driving the most tickets. Those are your best opportunities for automation because they're going to have the largest impact on your business from a time savings perspective. That's one. Number 2 is what are, separate from ticketed tasks, what are you doing multiple times per week or per month? Identifying those are going to be great opportunities, again, for getting big impact from automation. I want to break this down into like a really easy way to think about this. If I'm spending 5 minutes a week per tech on an activity, or even just one tech, and I can drop that down to 1 minute per week, over the course of a year, that's 200 minutes. I'm really bad at math. That sounds right. That's one task that you've automated that's only saving 4 minutes. And that's a really big impact over time, right? And so again, even if it's small things, but you're doing them multiple times per week and you can save a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you're getting significant business value over time. In addition, what are things that can be condensed down to 1 click? So if something takes 5 clicks, again, and I can make it 1 click, here's an example. If I have 5 separate scripts I have to run, and I can automate it so it drops down to 1, or I can combine those scripts into 1, so it's 1 click, you are saving time. And again, it could be a minute, it could be 30 seconds, but the more of these you're doing, the more building blocks you're building here, the more time you're saving and the more benefit you're going to realize over time. Because usually once you build these, it's relatively low lift to maintain these automations. And then finally, this is one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, but what information are you regularly going out and looking up or finding or running tasks to collect? If you can automate those, the risk there is really small. In particular, something like that takes action, for example, that there can be risk there. You have to test, you have to make sure things are doing what you expect. But if you're just collecting information, the risk there is relatively low. And again, you can save yourself a lot of time. So pushing out automations that help you collect information and make that information available to you when you need it, that's going to save you a lot of time. All these stats on the right here, these come from a survey we did with our partners. We got really good response. We got several hundred responses. 99% of our partners have saved time with automation. Now, we didn't ask the right question of, exactly how much, but we did bucket it. And about 50% are saving 5 or more hours per week through automation with NinjaOne. And this isn't just to pitch Ninja, that's great, but it's also leaning into automation has clear and defined positive outcomes from your business and can save you a lot of time. That's really what we're trying to highlight here. So let's move on to the next set of recommendations here. And this is to invest in more complex automations. So you take that low-hanging fruit, you identify the things that you're doing all the time that maybe you can condense down or maybe you can fully automate. And then you look at the bigger picture, more complex automation. So one really big time savings is what can you replace remote access with in terms of automation? So one of our partners, they're a university, they were using remote access pretty much almost entirely for their remediations. And then they invested in scripting and automation and spending time building out, common remediations in the form of automations instead of using remote access. And just by doing that, they were able to take about 30% of their time out of remote access right off the top and backload it onto automations. Now, let's say you have 10 techs, you've got a couple thousand endpoints you're managing. That's very significant time savings. It's hundreds of hours a year, possibly more than that, just by taking some things that you're using remote access for and moving them to automations. The reason why is no matter how fast your remote access solution is, you go, you find the device, you connect, it takes a couple minutes to connect. You have to make sure the person's not on there or that they're available. There's the communication that happens. You can cut out all of that time by taking it out of remote access and putting it into an automation. Efficiency isn't the only benefit of automation. A really big benefit of automation is your ability to remove human introduced error. If I'm doing a 5-step task and I do it over and over again, even if it's mindless, if I'm doing it over and over again, I'm going to screw up sometimes. I'm just not that good. And that's why I'm in marketing and not a technician, I guess. But, if I do it 100 times, maybe I introduce errors 2 or 3 times, and then you've got to go back and troubleshoot and fix it, right? Automation introduces standardization and therefore reduces human error, right? Because if I've built it and I've tested it and I've reviewed it, I know there's no human error in it. And then every time I run this automation, I'm going to have the same outcome. Now, that obviously discounts the fact that there are different machines and different environments. And so there is some nuance there. But in general, automation will improve standardization, which reduces human introduced error. And so leaning into automation for that purpose, yes, it's going to save you time, make you more efficient, but it's also going to reduce error, which is a huge efficiency boost and a better outcome for both your IT team and the end users. And then last, this is really like the true promise, the holy grail, if you will, of automation is what can I make fully closed loop, right? What can I detect and resolve without any human intervention? And so the really basic, simple use case we always use, and it's kind of stupid, but it's important is, if a print spooler goes down, can I detect that, bring it back up, and then no one knows, no one was affected. Everyone's just happy instead of the 2 to 3 to 5 minutes it would take to go in and fix that, right? And so, yes, that can happen on that very simple use case, but it can also happen on much more complex automations as well, where you're detecting a state, an issue, a problem, and then attempting at least to automatically resolve that and take the human completely out of it, which is again going to that fully automated remediation and huge time savings. 2 stats here on the right, 79% of our partners reduce ticket volumes after switching to NinjaOne. Again, that's through things like, better device maintenance, automated remediation, that sort of thing. And then about 70% reduced mean time to resolution, which is again, super helpful because some of that will be through, immediate closed loop remediation, but a lot of it will also be, hey, we've condensed this remediation down to one click through a script, for example. So that can save you a lot of time. All right, so second to last here, we have automating complete workflows. Which multi-step complex processes take up a lot of time. The classic example here is onboarding new devices. And just a quick pitch, we do have a webinar that Jeff and I did around automating new device onboarding that I do recommend you go and look at. You can go to our website, ninjaone.com/events, and actually look up that recording. But that's the classic example here. If I have to deploy a bunch of applications, make configuration changes, add users, maybe join the domain, whatever it may be, all of those steps, one, you're having complexity that introduces human error. It's a lot of steps and a lot of time and a lot of babysitting. It's not a huge value add, right? So if you can automate that, you can save a ton of time and reduce the possibility of errors. So you get a better outcome every time. That's a classic example. Another example here is from Leo Rakeman at Cloud4x. They were actually deploying, ripping and replacing their VPN, and they have it's a fairly complicated installation process. And they were deploying the VPN, deploying configurations to that VPN, and then monitoring I think there's 4 particular possible failure points in the way they deploy these and the way that they're used. And they're actually then doing ongoing monitoring on those 4 failure points so that they can remediate them if they occur. And you can, that is not the use case I've actually written in the quote here, but that was another use case that they had, and it saved them a ton of time because they could automate the deployment of the VPN, the configuration of it, and the monitoring of it. So if there were ever issues, they could automatically remediate it and save a bunch of time. Leo here also did mention that they saved a bunch of time with new device onboarding, which is important as well. So then the last one here on the left is using Ninja for monitor and as a logic switch to route automations and tickets. So this is a great example of where you can build more complex multi-step automations using things like custom fields and script result conditions in Ninja, where you can actually pull in data from multiple sources and multiple activities to build switches, right? If this and this and this, then trigger another automation. And this is where you can get really complex and automate more complex workflows to save you time. This is really, an investment. This is sort of the things that you do after you master the basics, but they can be really impactful. And I think those 2 examples from Leo are good highlights. So automation isn't just for RMM. There are a lot of other opportunities to automate in your environment. So documentation can be automated. If you have the ability to pull information from your environment and about your environment, you can often automate that information as well, and collecting that documentation and making sure it's available to everyone. There are opportunities to use that documentation for additional automation through your endpoint management solution. And then finally, automating as much as possible on the administrative side of ticketing. So routing, auto-responding, providing follow-up, all of that to kind of take that administrative burden out as well, can save your team significant amounts of time around the administrative side of ticketing, which can be really impactful. So 2 more stats here: 22% of tickets can be resolved at essentially 0 cost. If you're really leaning into automation, you're auto-responding based on context of the ticket, that sort of thing. And I thought this was really interesting here, that it costs about $1.60 to manually handle a ticket per minute. Now, obviously, there's a lot of fluctuation here, but it is worth noting that there is a time cost for this that we should all be aware of. All right. Now my favorite slide here is so now we have some recommendations. We have some things we can do. How do I really make that part of what my company does? How do I really build that into our culture? And I do want to reiterate here, we had a great conversation with some of our the partners that we're really close with who provide feedback and input to us. And these recommendations come from them. And I think they can be really impactful if you really internalize them and bring them to your department. So the first one here is you have to start with a clear strategy and goals and operational maturity, as I mentioned at the beginning. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you have processes in place that can be automated? Do you have the operational maturity to make sure that you're doing that and you're measuring the results and you're having an impact, right? That's step one. Know what you want to automate first and really spend the time to build out that roadmap. The second is getting buy-in from your team. If you're the head of an IT department or if you're the CEO of an MSP, you really do need to make sure that everyone in your organization is looking for opportunities to automate and doing so in a way that builds buy-in and cross-functional opportunities for automation. So you can gamify or incentivize automation, both the identification and creation. Not everyone has to be able to create automations, but at least identifying those opportunities and passing them on to the people who can create them. A great way to do this is to find and nurture an automation evangelist. So someone in your organization who's naturally predisposed to identifying things that could be automated and then going out and building them and rolling them out to the team so everyone's aware of them, because everyone has to be aware, right? You can't build an automation, let it sit there in silos. Everyone has to be aware that that's happening. So getting buy-in from your team, making it a team priority, building OKRs if you use that framework around automation. That is probably the single most important thing that you can do to build a culture of automation. That's making everyone excited and bought into the idea of identifying and building automations. The third one is scheduling regular automation-focused team meetings. So doing ticket reviews, diving into team suggestions, going back through old automations that don't make sense anymore or that aren't providing the outcomes that you want, and having meetings and conversations around automation and the impact that those automations are having. That's kind of this last one here, measure and track results. If you're doing that, you can go back to your team and say, look, this is how much time it's saving. This is how many rote repetitive tasks that you hate to do. You don't have to do anymore because of the automation that we're doing. One last recommendation here is providing non-production devices to thoroughly test and vet new automations. There is a slight cost here, but if you can stand up a virtual environment with a couple devices so that you can test these things out and make sure that you have a rollout plan and make sure everything's validated before you roll out automations, that's going to give you much better result with a lot lower risk as well. So if you can take all of this back to your team and really reinforce and get buy-in from your team to build a culture of automation, that's going to be the biggest thing that you can do. You can ignore everything else I've said. Please don't, but you could. And if you build this, then the team will naturally come together in identifying and building automations that have an impact. So this next slide is a little bit of an eye chart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. These are real-world automation use cases that our partners have shared with us, from repetitive processes like password rotation and creating user accounts to complex processes and even to monitoring. So what I'd love everyone to do is to jump in chat now and add the most impactful things that you've automated or that your team has automated so that your peers can see what they are. I'm going to open up chat and I'm going to read some of them out because I'd love to see what you guys are automating. We've got Andy Klein here saying OneDrive monitoring. Daniel Blanton is saying employee offboarding. Ray is using offline alerts. David Chow is looking for missing programs and installing them automatically. Matt's talking about BitLocker. I'm assuming monitoring and rolling out BitLocker encryption. Julie's talking here about retiring CI, so configuration items, remote software installs. Yeah, lots of onboarding and offboarding. Michael Eckley here is talking about monthly workstation maintenance, so clearing the temp folders, running scan now, DISM, etc. Windows 11 upgrades, monitoring of AV and security packaging, uninstalling old software, removing or adding map drives. Let's see, Jeff, let me know if you see any because I'm talking a lot here.
I definitely saw a good one that we've referred to before, which is tracking local admin access, who has that, and if somebody should not have that access, and you would do that by verifying against a custom field that has who the authorized admin names are, and that can be stored at the organization level, location level, or device level. A great way to ensure that people who should not have admin access do not have it.
Awesome. Let's see. Windows Lapse implementation is a great one. Cleaning up stale software from previous applications. Sysmon. I see a lot of people here who are rolling out their AV or their EDR solution. Great use case. Let's see. They have lots of scanners and ID scanners, and they are restarting those services as needed. Alerting on app vulnerabilities. Let's see. Deploying common desktop folder shortcuts. Let's see. Wow. There's a lot of them in here. We're going to pull these out after the fact and actually put them into a Dojo article, I believe. So keep adding them. We'll keep, yeah, I'm going to stop reading them off now, but if you keep adding them, we will add them to that transcript after the fact so you guys can check them out. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jeff to talk about these 4 examples and show you kind of how to build them out in NinjaOne. All right.
Thank you very much, Pete. And I am now sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see it right about now. All
We
right.
can.
So we're going to first talk about auto removing certain applications. As a focal point, I'm going to be using GoToAssist, but this could really apply to any remote access software. It could also apply in a variety of other ways that we'll talk about a little bit later in the demo. To start with, we would first start by what's triggering our action here. We want to detect that GoToAssist is present, and within Ninja, the easiest way to do that is to use our conditions inside of policies. So I'm going to go into my Waystar Royco policy here, and then if I go into my conditions, this is where I'm going to set up a condition. Now, to start with, you have to think of what is the triggering action here? What do I want to look for that signifies the presence of this application? Because there could be a variety of different ways that you want to key in on that. I'll start with what I think is the most basic one, which is just that the software is installed as an application within the software inventory. And that is very easy, just to create a new condition here in the top left. From there, I would select a condition, and from the drop-down list, you'll see that software is an option. Now, in this case, we're looking for either the presence or maybe the absence of the software. In this case, I'm not looking for GoToAssist not existing. I want to look for it being installed on the machine. At that point, I would need to look for the name of the software. Now, Ninja looks for the exact name of what you type into this box here. So it has to match exactly within add remove programs or the software inventory. That can be a little difficult. Some applications install with a version number in the name. And so how do you account for that across all of your different devices? The easiest way is to use asterisks as wildcards. So I can put an asterisk, go to assist, and then another asterisk. And in this case, I'm just looking for any application that has GoToAssist within the title. Doesn't really matter what's coming before GoToAssist or on the left-hand side of it, or what's coming after GoToAssist on the right-hand side of it. It just has to have GoToAssist somewhere within the application name. So I'll go ahead and create that. And this is creating my alert. This is great. It would let me know that blacklisted software is present, but we're talking about automation here. So how can we respond to this in an automated way? On the right-hand side, you'll see that with conditions, we can respond to any condition with a script or multiple scripts. In this particular case, I would go ahead and leverage a script just to uninstall an application. Now, this is a generic script. It's available within the dojo, and it allows you to type in the name of the software that you want to install as a preset parameter that you can see right here. You can define this as a option, a drop-down option when you go into the actual script itself. In this case, I'm just going to type in the name of the application that I want to remove, which is going to be GoToAssist. And in this case, I don't need to include wildcards because that's already built into the script. So I'll go ahead and create that there. And so now I have a way to respond. Now, a couple of caveats with this. First is that I'm using a generic uninstall application script. I would certainly want to test and validate that this works to uninstall the blacklisted software quietly or silently without notification to the end user, and that it actually does remove the application. Certain applications, another remote access software like TeamViewer, I believe, does not allow itself to be uninstalled quietly. So in that case, you might have to use a dedicated uninstaller or a dedicated PowerShell script. And again, we already have that dedicated PowerShell script to remove TeamViewer in our dojo, which is our documentation portal. The other thing to be aware of here is that not every remote access solution is going to install within the software inventory or install within the HKLM registry that we monitor. It may install as a service, or it could operate as a portable executable, so it would show up as a process. And so in that case, we would need to reevaluate what we want to trigger or serve as our trigger to notify us that our blacklisted software is present on the machine. So in this case, I'm actually going to flip this around and look not for it being installed as software. I'm going to look for GoToAssist being installed as a service. So in this case, I'm looking for GoToAssist, and then I'll come down here and say, let me know when this exists. Doesn't matter if it's up or down. I just want to know when that service is installed on the machine. And so in that case, same basic behavior here. I'm trying to install it or otherwise remove the application, but I'm triggering based off of a service or perhaps the process being active as a way to get around the fact that not every remote access application is going to install within or as an application. It may operate as a service or just as a process. So this is a great way to remove blacklisted software, but you can probably see that this would also be a really big assist with new device onboarding. I have certainly done quite a bit of that in my time, and I've done it manually. And to Pete's point, it is definitely something that brings up a lot of potential for error. You can always forget something, or you think you did something and you didn't do it, even if you're following a checklist. So automating as much of that as possible is a great idea. Now, let's go ahead and cancel out here. And we're going to stay within our conditions to start with. I like using conditions for application deployment because it's always on. It's just always going to check, and as soon as software maybe gets uninstalled from the endpoint, then you can go ahead and have the software automatically redeployed. So in this example, maybe I want to ensure that a particular application is installed, and I might look maybe for Sophos not being present on the machine. I'll say that Sophos does not exist. And so if Sophos does not exist, I would then go ahead and respond to that with a script. Now, in this case, the script could be a custom PowerShell script, but to get you started, we do have our native install application script. And this lets you upload up to a 1 gigabyte MSI or EXE to our servers so that you can easily push this out silently or quietly to all the endpoints that are on this policy and happen to be missing the Sophos antivirus. And of course, you could also use the software condition that we saw earlier and instead look for software that doesn't exist. Again, it all comes down to what do you want to key on as the trigger to then take this automated action. And again, that's largely going to come down to the application itself, how it installs, and what's the best, most foolproof way to ensure that you are looking at the right spot to see if the software is present or not present. But let's go ahead and take a step back from conditions. Not everything can be a condition. Let's look at some basic device configuration options that you're going to want to take whenever you onboard new devices. If we go into our scheduled script section, I'm going to add a new scheduled script. And I'm going to use a scheduling option here that's called Run Once Immediately. This is an incredibly powerful scheduling option within Ninja to ensure that you're running the script or scripts inside this block across all the devices that are on this policy. And that includes new devices to join this policy. So anybody who gets installed and joins this policy in 6 months, this script will run as soon as they install Ninja. It will also run on all your current devices that are on this policy. If they're online, it runs immediately. If they're offline, we wait for them to come back online and then we'll run the script. So this is ideal for device configuration and ensuring that everybody has the same settings. And a lot of these examples are very common. Right here, I'll go ahead and add in a script perhaps to create an admin user. Again, this is in the dojo, so you do have the access to this exact same script. And similar to the last script that I used, this one also accepts parameters. It accepts two. One is the username you want to create, and the other is the actual password. So in this case, I might call this MSP admin, the name of my service account, and then I'll do a space and I'll type in an extremely secure password right there. And I can go ahead and create that and apply. And so now any device on this policy is going to have this script run, and it's going to ensure that the admin account is present. Now, I would recommend that anything you want to run once immediately for device configuration, and we'll go ahead and we'll just say this is new device configuration up here as the name of this script block. You can add in multiple scripts. The benefit of this is, and what I would certainly recommend is anything you're running once immediately, include that in a script block like this. You would not want to have individual line items outside of this with multiple run once immediately script blocks, because if you have 3, 4, 5 scripts that are all trying to run once, they could step on each other. They could be conflicts there. In this case, if I add in another script, perhaps I want to go ahead and also make sure that USB devices are disabled for use as mass storage devices. I can have this script execute here. By virtue of having them in this one script block, they're going to occur sequentially, so one after the other, and they're not going to step on each other like they would if I had them as separate line items outside of this modal window here. Now, what you can do is whenever a new device does run this script block is you might want to create a ticket. So right here, we can go ahead and create a ticket to have a log, have a record that the configuration actions that we're taking here are actually taken on this device. And I'm using some very basic examples here of MSP admin or disabling USB drives. This could also be joining the device to a domain potentially. It could be installing a certain SSID profile so that you don't have to tell them the Wi-Fi password, or they have to manually enter that Wi-Fi password. They're all just good to go. Uh, you could even use Ninite, to install certain applications if you didn't want to have to maintain the repository you're on your own, or use even our third-party application patching to natively deploy certain applications. So you have a lot of different avenues here to ensure that your devices are in compliance and that they have not just the right applications installed, but they're all set up to operate properly. We did do a webinar on this back in early January that I would highly recommend. We get way more in depth on this. I think that webinar would also be useful because I am seeing some comments in the chat and in the Q&A about how to handle error handling within scripts. And we do talk about some of the scripts in there and how you can modify your scripts for better error handling so you have a firmer idea of why that script happened to fail and when it failed. We'll move on to actually back into the condition realm here to talk about how we can automate some of our alerts and conditions. So we've talked about how we might want to ensure that blacklisted software is removed. We've talked about how we want to ensure that our devices are in compliance and have the proper settings so that they can operate normally. Let's talk about how we can take a lot of the alerts that we're going to be generating and attempt to respond to them in an automated way. This particular example is going to use one of our built-in templates. So up here, you can see the use template option. This is primarily Windows event IDs and Windows services that are in use across the IT industry. One of which is the event ID to monitor for a failed login. So we'll go ahead and we'll create that right there. And once I click that, just by clicking it, it is now going to be present in my list here. It's this line item right here. And I'll go ahead and click on that. Now, just alerting me anytime a person fails to log into a device is not going to be very useful. If somebody could typo their password, I do it all the time. And that's a false positive that you don't want to create because it just creates more noise and creates more inefficiency. It doesn't actually streamline anything. So if I click into the actual condition here, you'll see where I can make this a more specific notification to only alert when there's a valid reason for it to. For example, the occurrence count right here. I'm going to go ahead and say I want this to trigger, if this event ID triggers 3 times within 5 minutes, to me, that is a good indication that somebody is attempting to brute force the machine, trying to get into some place they shouldn't be, or they need assistance because their password is clearly not what they think it is. And in this case, I might also expand this maybe up to 15 minutes. It really just depends on the sensitivity of how this is triggering. You want to eliminate the noise, but you still want to receive the alert whenever you have a valid reason for it. So this is good. We now have something that is less noisy. It's only going to trigger when we think that there's a real valid issue. And again, we might want to create a ticket for this so that we are notifying our help desk that they need to take a closer look at this. But that could introduce some delays, right? A technician might not be able to immediately get to that issue, and this is a potential compromise here. We probably want to respond to this as quickly as we can. And so again, we can respond to this with a script over on the right-hand side. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and use a script to actually retrieve the username of the person who failed to log in. So I want to know who is having difficulty here. And you can see in the description here that this is actually retrieving the user who failed to log in. And it's going to write that information into a custom field. We haven't talked about custom fields within Ninja yet, but they're exactly what they sound like. It's a data field that you can manually interact with, put data inside of it. But I personally think the more common use case and the bigger benefit is that the custom fields can receive the output of scripts. So if you have a batch, PowerShell, or shell script that is collecting data, for example, the last user who failed to log in, you can then write that information into a custom field. You could also do the inverse where you're storing information within a custom field, and then you can retrieve that and use that as a variable within the script. And we will do that actually in the very next example. But in this case, I'm retrieving information and then writing it into that custom field. And then my second script here that I'm going to run is actually just to go ahead and then delete that user. So right here, this script is saying, okay, well, let's look at that custom field, let's find that user, and then let's go ahead and delete them. So this is a great way to store information within Ninja, use it as kind of a logic switch so that you can then take action on the data inside that custom field. I know that there was an example in the chat. That is a good example I've used many times. I think I have a post in the script share section of the forum on it, where it will retrieve a list of everybody who's a local administrator user. That is a script that is in our template library, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel there. Just import it into your environment, and you can see all the underlying code in the template library, so you know exactly what the script is doing. And so that script would report on our local administrators back into a custom field. At that point, we could say, well, if we have anybody who has admin access and they are not authorized for it, we might then want to automatically remediate. Again, just an example of how you can use the tools and what we're showing here today, not for those specific examples, but maybe as a guideline or a way to see how you can take the items that you're dealing with on a consistent basis and then automate them using the tools that we're demonstrating. And I would say that Pete made a great point there about how do you determine, what you would like to automate. It's look at your tickets. What's generating tickets? What are you dealing with all the time that is eating up that time? For example, in my previous position, I realized that I was dealing with a lot of low disk space calls. People were always calling me up and saying, "Hey, we have low disk space." And obviously I could do something very generic like deleting temporary files or emptying the recycle bin, but there's a half-life on that. It'll work once or maybe twice, but for ongoing issues with low disk space, it's not really solving any, it's not really automating anything. But I did a little bit of investigation and I looked and I realized that a lot of those tickets dealt not with temporary files or with the recycle bin, but actually with cached Windows Update files that were not being purged properly. And so that became a script that I could very easily write that says, go ahead and delete all the files out of this particular directory. And that cut down on the amount of low disk space calls that I was getting almost to none. So that's, again, a great way you can look and see what is eating up your time, what's stuff that you're having to deal with on a recurring basis, and then automating it. It can be very simple, but we all know that those 5-minute calls, those 10-minute calls, they add up. And so even the simplest automations, I think, can give you a very big benefit in giving you some of your time back. The last thing I want to talk about is actually not within the RMM itself. It's within our ticketing platform. And I want to talk about how we can take the actual tickets themselves that you're receiving and be a little bit more discerning in trying to identify easy tickets and then maybe provide some examples and resources to your end users, to whoever's requesting assistance, to try and help them out a little bit more quickly, again, taking some of the load off your help desk team. And so I'm going to switch tabs here, same environment. I just want to show you the ticketing side of the configuration here. You can see that we do have an automation section under the ticketing configuration. And in this example, what I want to show is something we've heard is a very common scenario, which is users who require some form of password reset. Now, in certain cases, this can only be done by the help desk, and that's why they're contacting you. But in many cases, they're reaching out simply because they don't know how to do it properly. And so you can build in automations to provide links to documentation on how they can perform those common actions. Again, we need to decide what exactly we want to key in on as our trigger point. In our particular case, I think the subject line for password reset would be a very good example of how we could identify tickets that happen to deal with whatever issue we're trying to streamline. In this case, I have my automation here. I'm going to look at an event-based automation. The event-based automation that I'm creating is looking for 2 pieces of criteria. It's looking for a ticket being created, and then it's also looking at the subject line of that email. And so if the subject line contains password or maybe password reset, I can then go ahead and say, well, I want to take some form of automated action. And that action could be any of these items right here. I could add or remove tags, add or remove somebody to be copied here. In this case, I think the best way to do this is actually to add a form comment in here. This is your frequently used answer in response to a frequently asked question. And so I can go ahead and add a comment in here, provide a link, say, hey, here's a link to how you can reset your password for whatever this particular service happens to be. This is, again, an excellent way to kind of take some of the common drivers of tickets on the help desk and provide automated reactions to them. But let's go ahead and take a step back. Maybe this is too much automation. Maybe this is giving us too much potential for false positives and sending out something incorrectly. How can we ease the load on the help desk, but maybe not introduce more potential failure where, again, we're creating more noise than is really going to be beneficial for us? And so I'm actually going to use a different type of automation, which would be a response template. A response template is different from an event or a time-based automation within ticketing because a response template has to be clicked on. It is essentially a one-touch macro. If you click on it, it can take a variety of actions within your ticket, including adding in a form response. So in this case, I would add in a new response template. I would go ahead and add a comment in here. I can add in my form text. I could even use a placeholder down here to refer to the requester, maybe their first name. I can go ahead and paste that in there and then provide links to documentation, whatever I want my form text to be. And at that point, the ticket comes in. I look at it as a help desk technician and I say, okay, this is about a password reset. I just go to the top right corner. I click on my response templates. I enter this response template. And at that point, this text is already within the body of the ticket there. So I can very easily send that response out with a minimal amount of effort. You'll note here that these response templates can impact not just the body of the ticket, so the actual response that you're sending out. We can add tags, we can add people to be CC'd, we can update the ticket, maybe assign it to a different organization, a different person, change the requester. So there's a lot of meat on the bone here for you to automate. This is also great for standardization. If you don't want to necessarily rely on your help desk technicians being able to type in a tag or assign it to the right person, you can very easily build in automations like this one down here that allow you to escalate up your tier system from tier 1 to tier 2. You can see that we're adding in a comment here, we're adding tags, we're removing tags. It takes something that could be maybe 10 different clicks normally for a help desk technician, and it automates it into one click. So it's not just about automation being able to do something entirely on its own without any human interaction. It's also about being able to lessen the amount of human interaction that you need for certain tasks just like this. And with that, I think I ran a little over. So we'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Pete for some of the questions.
We have to do one last item here. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate that. We will come back to questions. I'm going to rush to the marketing stuff here at the end. If you are not a current customer, NinjaOne, we call our platform the Unified IT Management Platform. It is truly unified, all your devices, all your workflows in a single pane of glass for remote monitoring and endpoint management. We've got patching, software deployment, monitoring, alerting, scripting, automation. You've kind of seen all that today. As well as add-ons for remote access, endpoint security, backup, ticketing, and documentation. Use part of the platform, use all of it. Would love to have you as a partner. I'll skip the rest. That's NinjaOne. All right, so we do have a giveaway today. We do have a GoPro and 2 Yetis, and Christine, if you could give those out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pete. I hope we're all enjoying the webinar. I always like to say I'm here for the fun stuff. So thanks so much for sticking around. I'll start with the Yetis. So our 2 winners for the Yetis are Julie Gordon and Brian Dean. Congratulations to you both. And now drum roll for the GoPro, please. The winner is Jeff Bunt. Congratulations, Jeff. Be on the lookout for an email from me, and we'll get that out to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. For those who have time, we do have 10 minutes left for Q&A. We have a lot of them. There's one that came up a lot that I did want to jump in on, and that's identifying software that was installed as an end user versus as system. Is there a way to do that in Ninja, and or is there a way to see end user installed applications through conditions so that you can do that auto remediation, et cetera? Can you talk about that topic generally, Jeff?
I'm sorry, I think I cut out on the very beginning there. Could you repeat the beginning of the question?
Oh, sorry about that. The software that's installed as an end user versus software that's installed as system.
Yeah, so the best way to do that is to utilize a script. We spoke about the custom fields and how you can write information into them. So it is very possible to write a PowerShell script that pulls from the HKCU directory and looks for those applications that are installed in a user context. For example, I know Zoom does this frequently. I think Microsoft Teams also does it. And when you write that into a custom field, it can be a way for you to then alert on that data. So that would be the current workaround on that. I do think we have this on our roadmap to bring in user-based installations natively into the product. But for right now, it's HKLM and I believe all the AppX Microsoft Store applications that we would display. I believe we have a script in the dojo for the HKCU applications. If we do not, I think I have one, and I will post that in the script share section of the form.
Yeah, we have a fellow ninja in chat. Stephen Murphy did mention that Regkey works too.
Perfect.
Awesome. There is a question that I want to answer because I want to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek on something. Our PM team is probably going to yell at me for this, but I'm going to anyway. Someone asked about making applications, app installs persistent outside of policies. So right now, if you want to set up an install application script, you really do it inside the policy and it lives there. In our next release, we are going to release the ability to save app installs to our app library. I'm going to show it really quick. This isn't in a QAR environment, so if anything goes wrong, I apologize, and I'll take the getting yelled at by PM here. So if I come over here to add, again, this is not available. It won't be available until after our next release, but I do want to show it. You can create an installation script in the future, and I would upload my MSI here. I'm going to use Firefox as an example. Come on, that stinks. Well, I would upload my MSI, and then when I give it a name, and when I save it, actually, let me go ahead and do URL here. Let's see if this works. Firefox, Windows architecture, blah, blah, blah. Okay, darn, /install.msi. There we go. Let's see if this works. No, we are doing validation. So if I did this and it actually worked, it would actually save, and then I can reference that in the future. So I'm going to do something that I probably shouldn't do just because I want to show this. Let's see if I have any exe files here, MSIs. Here we go. AnyDesk. There we go. Ta-da. So if I go ahead and save this, of course, it's going to upload it, and now it is, or it will be under install application. It's being reviewed to make sure I'm not uploading malware. Apparently, I can't do this really quickly on a webinar, but it would be here, and I could then reference it in our in my policy. So yes, you will have a software repository that you can upload your applications and create them once. So I did want to answer that question. That is being released after our next major release. I can't give you a date, but it's in the not too distant future. Awesome. We've got about 6 more minutes here, so I'm going to jump into some questions here. Here's an interesting one from Ray. What metrics do you use to assess speed, reliability, and overall performance? I'm assuming that's in relation to automations in general. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say less time, less energy, less money spent is probably the 3 best metrics to determine how you can, or what you are looking to do with automation and reducing your overhead and the load overall in your organization.
Awesome. Daniel asked, would run once immediately also be running as the logged in user? Oh, never mind. That's the question I had already asked you. Do we have any canned or pre-made scripts? You want to show those off?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to do. Let me go ahead and share my screen right here. And I will come out of policies where I currently am, and I will go into the library on the left-hand side. Now, I saw some comments in there about not wanting to use scripts where you don't know the actual content of the script. And our native scripts that you can see here,
Hey, Jeff.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you might be frozen. Is Jeff frozen for anyone else? Yeah, okay. I think I can share my screen because you seem to be frozen. Okay, I will do a
Am-
similar thing.
Am I
I'm
back
under,
now?
you do seem to be back, yeah. So I'm
Okay.
under, I'm in that other environment, so it'll look a tiny bit different. But if I go ahead and drop out of these, we do have a bunch built in, Windows and Mac. But then if you go over here to the template library, you can actually see a bunch that you can import, some great things like set login message, set local admin password, set idle lock. And if I go ahead and import these, you can actually see the entire script right here. So you can see it and make edits, etc., and make it unique to your environment, and go ahead and import that, and that will be available to you in your environment. So I'll hand it back to you, Jeff.
No, thank you. And I think I saw somebody in there say they didn't have access to the template library. That may have been in reference to something previously on the webinar. But if you don't have access to the template library, please reach out to our support team. That should be something every single Ninja has access to.
Yep. I think we'll end on one last question. This is from Caleb. Why would someone use Ninja for doing things like mapping drives as opposed to group policy? So why would you use Ninja instead of group policy in general?
Yeah, I would say it is the access that you're going to have to your machine. Your GPOs are only good when your devices are on domain. It's only going to be good when you actually are connected to that DC. So if you're looking to ensure that on any device that has an internet connection, that I think is the power of an RMM and being able to manage your devices regardless of what network they're on, regardless of what DC they are, regardless of if you have a domain environment. A lot of networks these days are distributed. It's a distributed workforce environment. And so being able to have an RMM take those settings and not have to rely solely on GPO, I think is a big benefit. And again, if you have everything in the RMM, why make yourself do the work twice? Go ahead and do everything through the RMM, and that way you don't have to rely on doing twice the work, half of it in GPO and then half of it in the RMM.
Awesome. I am actually going, so there's a lot of good information in chat as well. Check that out. I'm going to answer one last question. Can Ninja manage a Raspberry Pi? Today, Ninja cannot manage a Raspberry Pi, but that is under active development and will be released probably this year. So you will have that available to you as well. So that's a probably. We're very, very early on. It could change. I don't want my anime account managers to get yelled at, but hopefully that'll be here soon. So with that, we do hope you enjoyed the webinar. We will send out the recording after the fact. We will pull some of this chat information out and see if we can post it in the dojo so that it can be available to you all. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.